Welcome to the Human Factors and Ergonomics Hub, a series of educational podcasts that showcase the connection between human capabilities and good work design, brought to you by the Human Factors and Ergonomics Society of Australia. Hi and welcome to the HFE Hub. So great to be back with you. I have an action-packed podcast for you today as I'm chatting with Heather Kahle. Heather is the previous president of the Human Factors and Ergonomics Society of Canada and currently works as a consultant. Heather, thank you so much for joining us on the Human Factors and Ergonomics Hub today. And I think it would be great for our podcast audience if you could maybe just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Happy to. I just want to start by saying thanks for this great opportunity, Sharon, to be with your audience today. So a little bit about myself. Well, I grew up in Ontario, and one of my very earliest jobs was working in a mine. So that basically helped shape a lot of where my career has led me. I was able to look at a lot of different kinds of work, and a part of that was actually looking at how things don't always go according to plan. And it actually dovetailed in with my education some years later. Where we were looking at incidents and kind of delving into all the different influencing factors that might play a role. So that's just a little bit about where I grew up. But later on, I went to school at University of Waterloo. I started exploring into the realms of systems design and kinesiology, and that too kind of added added to a career focus on understanding those broader kind of contextual issues. And then now fast forward to where I'm at now. I jumped out of a traditional role at the health and safety regulator, and I'm applying this expertise to help companies learn and understand their work and their processes that can lead to improvements and just better understanding of work.
Fantastic. And you started in mining. So I imagine that these days you do some mining projects. So maybe you could tell us about some of the work that you're doing there.
Yeah. So the journey has not always been in mining. I spoke a little bit about my education, but I ended up getting a lot of hands-on experience through the regulator. My almost 30-year career at the regulator, which allowed me exposure to some really great learning at the National Transportation Safety Board, looking at systemic investigations, and then also courses further afield, like in Brazil, looking at resilience engineering. So I kind of bundle that, and it really helped shape some of the work. And I have had the fortune of being able to get into mining, and a very recent project with a big mine up north here in British Columbia was basically wanting to fill the need of looking at actually a very traditional kind of task, like a manual material handling task, looking at carrying mine samples from basically the field, like it was an open mine, to the lab. So handling samples and just the nature of the job really created a potential for a lot of musculoskeletal injuries, and so that's where it began. That job.
So did they approach you?
Yeah, they did reach out. I'm one of very few consultants in the province. We have a lot of resources here, but many are very gainfully employed elsewhere. So they did ask for a very conventional approach, looking at tasks. And because of my background and just, the trajectory that I've been on, I was able to basically have a conversation about going beyond some of the traditional approaches, like looking at, they really wanted a biomechanical, like physical analysis of the posture, the weights, the loads, and recommend a better way of doing it. And while that's very valuable, I was also talking about how, doing a learning team or conducting a talk through, and really understanding what the job entails and how the job is done, something that we classically call work as done. Something that, like a traditional checklist, or, if you focus on a certain pocket of ergonomics, be it physical or like the psychological, cognitive, might miss. So taking that broader approach, I was really able to advocate for, and they still did get their physical risk assessment, but we were able to kind of delve into the bigger system elements as well. It was fun.
Well, how did you start the project? One of the most difficult things when someone gives you a job is to respond in the way that you believe you should respond versus responding in the way that they've asked you to respond. Mm-hmm. Maybe you could tell me about that.
Yeah, very great question. And actually, I have had the opportunity to guest lecture in front of a few student bodies recently, and that same question has popped up a few times, because I think, be it if you're a young career ergonomist or even tenured, the employer may start out with a set of expectations or a set of questions saying, we want to know what the physical risk factors are for fill in the blank. And while they're not wrong, or, those are good questions, what I try to, do is give them a blend of services or tools, methods that can, really approach the situation and deliver what they're asking for, but kind of go above and beyond. So in this particular situation, they definitely wanted a physical analysis of some of these material handling tasks. And so I basically had to talk about the value of embedding the numbers in the context. You can use NIOSH, arm force field, some psychophysical risk analysis methods, but they may not be as useful or as sufficient to really uncover the broader system risks that are influencing the work. I've got many examples, but they were, those tools are quite limited in looking at the repetitive nature of certain tasks in a certain work area. It might look at a task, but not at multiple tasks that are quite similar, which could add to the physical demands. They're also not as great at exploring communication gaps. Either lack of communication or wrong communication, and gaps in conveying information between parties. So those are just a couple of examples, but the physical is good when it's better when coupled with kind of some of that broader, those broader lenses that you might apply in a systems approach.
So you mentioned a couple of tools that you use. What did you use in this particular project? Tell us about what you found when you got there.
Right. Well, I think probably most on listening today might be familiar with, understanding the work. And so something that we try to do is learn from normal everyday work. And there's a lot of great resources out there about that. And one of the tools I would say that I use is a walkthrough, talk-through. So that's where, to use an expression that Sidney Decker coined, is I jump inside the tunnel. So I try to look at the work through the lens of the people that know the work and do the work. And so how that can really be different than maybe a traditional approach. And it's interesting because I just was, again, posed this question in a different context, but, where do you get started? And the temptation to look at some of those granular aspects, whether or not it's pushing a library book cart or looking at the weights and the configuration of a steam tray in a hospital kitchen, looking at handholds, weights, frequencies, etc. The temptation is to dive straight into the task factors. But a walkthrough, talk through, what it allows for is to kind of pull back our lens, zoom out, and really uncover, some of the broader aspects of the work context. So walkthrough, talk through is really gaining information through the lenses of the people that know the work and do the work, or maybe a supervisor. They also have very good perspectives. And then once you have those kind of big picture nuggets, or big, like the rocks, like the wide angle, then you might start to go slightly more granular with another great tool that I work with, that I've developed. I like to call it Spark for learning, to ignite learning. It's just an acronym that's really easy for ergonomists, employers, health and safety professionals to latch on to really uncover and engage workers around solutions. S for solutions and successes, adaptations or assumptions. Perhaps when doing work, the people that do the work, they've already developed great ways of doing the work, or they've uncovered a solution that helps them. So as an ergonomist or somebody evaluating the work, it's very good to know what those ideas might be, or if they have to adapt their work in a certain way because of low temperatures, or because of high heat, or lack of resources, personnel, etc. But also A or R for rules or realities of work, the realities of work. So you've got maybe cold temperatures or rules that might not fit, and then knowledge, K for knowledge gaps or knowledge that's needed, specialty knowledge, and I think I might have skipped over the P for problems or pain points, and actually that could be physical, something hurts, or it's heavy, or that sort of thing, or maybe it's an annoyance. Asking workers what really annoys them, and you get a very long, detailed answer in some cases.
I can imagine that could have gone on for years, really. So did you use Spark in this particular project that you're working on?
I did. It's an informal conversation guide to really look at the positives. There are different frameworks out there that look at work through different angles, through different questions. And I don't, throw it out as a formal, let's go through Spark, but I use it as a conversation guide to help me explore with the workers what's working, what's a problem, what are their adaptations, assumptions, what are the realities that, they have to face day in and day out. And from there, the nuggets just start pouring in. The worker insights are rich, they're deep. And I think when we pair the really rich, nuggets with the numbers from maybe doing a NIOSH or armed force field or some other, quantitative analysis, you get a really rich, very expansive evaluation, which, goes beyond the numbers and, talks to the bigger picture.
So what were some of the findings? The employer has sent you in, or they've sent you in to look at a particular thing, and then you do your walkthrough, talk through. I imagine that there were differences in the responses. What did you find? So
it was really interesting because there was initially, when you think of doing work in the field, in kind of air bunnies in quotes, in the field, where you'd be subject to a lot of different constraints, weather, travel, maybe carrying distances, handling constraints. You're left with a certain way of doing it, etc. The belief at the outset was that the field aspects would be more strenuous, would be more physically demanding. And so that was basically the starting point. But it quickly surfaced through the analysis, both quantitative and qualitative, that some of the lab tasks, which when you think of a lab, like be it in an academic setting or maybe in a field setting, you think it's much more controlled, like it's probably not going to be minus 15. They don't have a tough terrain to walk over. They have, prescribed ways of doing certain things. They have work processes that, that help them, and they have a stool if they need to reach, so you might think that, yeah, that makes sense. Field will be much more, demanding, but it was really the other way around. And that came through the conversations as well as the numbers. The other thing, so just, it shifted the paradigm completely upside down from what the original thought was, which was really kind of interesting. But the other things that were uncovered is that there's these expectations around the way work is done and how they physically can't even achieve that process. When you look into the way the work is contextualized, or some of the constraints. So that was another really good finding. And I think the other really interesting finding was at the outset, there was some chatter about, well, why don't we just, put in some, mechanical, lifting devices, or change the way the work is done from point A to point B, kind of looking at those granular task aspects. And, after we compiled the information and presented even just some very preliminary information, some results, there was quickly a realization that the original trajectory of risk controls wasn't even going to fit. It wasn't going to work. It wasn't going to produce the results that they had hoped for. So there was kind of an initial discovery or aha moment, essentially, thinking, okay, this is, not what we expected, and let's look into this further. So some really great nuggets came out of pairing the tools and sharing those preliminary results.
I love those aha moments, but often they're followed by a big silence whilst you try to work out where you're going. So what did you decide to do?
So in the end, we're still going back and forth with looking at the results. We were able to produce a report that not only was able to graphically represent some of the black and white numbers and show where certain physical task demands were being exceeded. But we were able to embed those in the broader context and look at the influences of the sheer repetition and handling practices, the communication aspects, and just the location, the terrain, some of the other physical constraints like the weather and some of those thermal aspects, working near ovens where the temperatures would be much higher than one might expect. Like if you're working in minus 15, you might think, oh, working near an oven would be good. But then when you're working in, 26 to 28 degrees Celsius, that presents other challenges. So in the end, some good conclusions were drawn. We're not quite at the implementation stage. We're definitely still at a conversation stage, but the kind of collective understanding that we don't want to head into making changes in a kind of a piecemeal fashion was drawn out. And that conclusion in and of itself is really good. I think in a traditional kind of physical demands analysis approach, you might look at the risk factors and conclude if you make the weight less heavy or you make the distances that you have to reach shorter, or the heights easier to access, that you just change those specific variables and you'll reduce the physical demands. And while some of that is true in these very complex array of tasks, it was a really nice discovery to see that we don't want to just go in and change single factors that might have impact or influence on other factors and then make them worse potentially. So want to try to understand the system before going ahead with making those single changes that might on the surface look really attractive.
What are some of the challenges that you face then in this project?
Oh, well, on a simple level, one needs to consider the writing utensils when you're working in minus 15 degree weather. Might sound comical, but when you are trying to take notes and your hand is freezing or the ink in the pen is freezing, those present very real challenges in the moment. So I guess the other challenges is we early on we are at the disposal or at the mercy of the other processes that are happening on site, and so when processes change, personnel are available or not available. It's drop and go. So. In some cases, there might have been equipment malfunction or other maintenance issues that kind of ended certain tasks, or there was startup of new tasks, so changing sites, or like last minute changes, so being called from one site to a different site. So just basically the management of the work. Those are not challenges that are difficult to overcome, but just in the moment, they are changes that kind of influence the data collection and whether or not you might have to go back, and who you're talking to. The availability of people to do the work. In some camps, you've got 12-hour shifts and you've got 14 days in, 14 days out. So I came in right at the cusp of shifts ending and then new people starting. So that was both advantageous and it had some drawbacks. I was afforded the opportunity to get to talk to more people, but then some of the conversations that I was carrying on with people came, quickly to a conclusion. So those were some of the challenges. I mean, it's a remote mine site, so travel in, travel out. I think that's probably not an unusual factor for some work that gets done. So, and associated with that.
You would have learnt a few things from this project, even thus far. So what would you change if this project came up again, as an identical project came up? What do you think you'd change about the way you approached it or things that you did?
Right. I think initially, and to those listening who might start more with a physical approach, I really wanted to start with a more qualitative approach with maybe, say, a learning team or a focus group or some of these more qualitative approaches. And I like to start from that vantage point and then maybe work to a more quantitative or other pointy tools that like look at the risk factors. So I wanted to start qualitative and go quantitative, moving gradually closer to those factors that I know influence the material handling tasks that they were talking about. And I have to say, I got that completely flipped around for me. And I had great reservations, to be honest. I thought, well, the numbers are going to tell a story, and the numbers will tell a story. But I had my eyes open to the fact that starting with the numbers isn't necessarily a bad thing. If left to only the numbers, you can see that I could see, and the team learned that it can be limiting. But we had the opportunity and the fortune, actually, I don't know if this would always be the case. We had the fortune of taking the steps to kind of explore the story behind the numbers, get into some of the other gaps and opportunities that seem to be in plain sight. But, when you're, overseeing the tasks, you have productivity demands to keep track of, you have personnel to keep, you have a lot of field level hazards to deal with. Some of the bigger picture influences kind of fade into the background. So we were able to take the numbers, put them in context, and it was a really great discovery. I'd like to share that story much wider beyond this podcast too, because I think it's really exciting to see how the numbers and the qualitative aspects fit really nicely together. That was probably one of my biggest discoveries. I think I'd been always familiar with underground mining, and this was not that. So looking at just other equipment, processes, kind of how they process their sampling or their samples, etc. Lots of discoveries from a kind of a task focus area, or just the way the work gets done. It was quite surprising and really interesting.
You've mentioned learning teams a couple of times. Tell me about how you normally would run a learning team and what you think the benefits of them are.
Right. Well, I had the fortune of working with quite a large manufacturer and in the food manufacturing area. And they kind of wanted to learn about a learning team and do a learning team simultaneously. And so how we got started, you're giving an overview of the steps. And so for those listening, if they're not familiar, you really want to start with basically understanding the work. And to understand the work, a really good starting point is to understand that when work happens, work is emergent. Like, it's not just a function of people, of the task, or the environment. It's a combination of those three things. So we delved a little bit into kind of the system level nature of work. Don't spend too much time there. Don't get into the academia of it at all, but just that, where work happens, mistakes and outcomes that are unwanted might also happen. And so that kind of leads to a really great discussion about work. You've got work, and maybe I should start even with who would be present at a learning team. So you've got maybe 5 or 6 people. It's not a big team. And I've actually recently talked with another company that doesn't always have the fortune of being in a room to do a learning team. Learning teams can be conducted, I want to say, loosely, like on the fly. If you have to do them on a rig at site, you could be pretty creative with flip charts and gathering the team and supervisors, etc. You want 4 to 5 people. You want people maybe who oversee the work, have the ability to change the work, maybe maintenance, engineering, procurement, of course, the workers, the people closest to the work who do the work, very important to have them involved, and then understanding the work. And it's really important with a learning team to lay out the ground rules, because there might be discoveries on both ends from either the worker side or maybe the supervisor or management side saying, wow, I didn't know that you weren't following the rules that way. Like on the mine project, some information emerged that certain rules weren't being followed to the letter of the law. And there has to be some acceptance that if you want to really learn about the normal work, that we park our judgment, we park our our retaliation or discipline, and we listen. We really listen and try to understand just normal everyday work. And then from that point, usually I would, there's a couple of different ways. Sometimes the organization might have a starting point. We're having a lot of injuries. I would always recommend, even if you're having injuries, to always try to include maybe a perspective or information about, because even in jobs where you're getting injuries, there's going to be some people that don't get injured. Just not to focus on hunting for broken things or things that are gone wrong, but try to find pockets of capacity. And I was recently speaking with the director of, I'll probably get her new job title wrong, but I was recently speaking with somebody in mining, and they, instead of just looking for broken things, they're also trying to confirm capacity. And the point there is that we're not just looking for things that hurt, are broken, don't work, produced a surprise, which can be kind of negative. You also want to look for solutions, successes, and areas where workers have been able to build capacity and adapt and really be efficient in their work. And so you determine the starting point. That might be through injuries. It might be through surprises. It might be because a task is really going well. Like we have people that bid on the job. They always want to work in that job. And maybe you want to look at it because it's really resoundingly, really effective or efficient. And so then once you have that starting point, then working through a conversation using something like Spark, looking at solutions, problems or pain points, assumptions, risks, and knowledge to understand what's going on can really be helpful. And then you go away once you've really done a good job of defining the problem, defining the issue, concern, the question that's being asked, and you percolate or you just rest in it. And usually we do that by saying you go away overnight and you're just thinking about it. You're doing that soak time is what it's called, where you're just reflecting, and then you come back, and maybe it's over lunch, maybe it's over coffee break. Sometimes you don't always have the luxury of taking a break overnight, and then coming back, recapping any problems or concerns or information that was maybe not captured the first time around. And then you want to start exploring options, ideas, solutions, insights. And this is where we went with the Mind Project. And what became looking at a mechanical solution started to morph into what about communication and other aspects that were not initially on the forefront. And I think that's where the value of having the workers and the supervisors and different teams representatives from different teams come together can be really, really valuable. So that's a quick overview, but it's a great process, really.
It's a fantastic process, and I really pockets of capacity. Maybe just explore that a little bit more for me. So this is looking at is this looking at workarounds that have been successful as well as ideas? Just tell me a little bit more about that.
Right. Yeah. So it's kind of been happening over a couple of years, and I used to say things like, to enhance or to improve safety or to reduce risk. And I realized that what we do is not just about tamping down injuries, reducing risk through lots of courses and kind of training on resilience. You also want to improve what's going well. You want to do more of it. So if you think of it as a weigh scale, Dr. Eric Hollnagel uses this a lot. Like, you've got injury reduction on one side of the scale, and you've got looking at what's going well on the other side. And so, yes, it is good. I mean, in the wake of an incident, you want to try to reduce incidents. That's absolutely a great thing. But when we just go around trying to reduce injuries or tamp down things that are broken, or finding broken tools, or understanding why people are rushing or late or whatnot, it is tantamount to a wild goose chase or like a game of whack-a-mole. Like, you're constantly trying to tamp down things, but we do not have the capability to to control, constrain, and reduce all those factors that might possibly be at play. So that's where, looking at the positives or building capacity, the presence of barriers, the presence of those things that can really help things go well, is also very necessary or needed. And so, in addition to, reducing injury, if I can think to a time when we were looking at the silviculture industry, an industry where they're planting trees for a living. And it wasn't just about reducing injury, through hydration or physical fitness, etc. But, some people were termed highballers. And they literally had techniques and ways of approaching the work that really, call it maybe like as the nice word that you said, the workaround, or just ways of approaching work that were really effective. And so, rather than just integrating solutions that would reduce the risk, why not try to integrate those solutions or successful ideas that are already working? So I've changed my language. It's not just improving safety or, reducing injury. It's about, either building or improving that safety capacity.
In the time that we have left, you will have used numerous tools in your time, and we know that there's different tools for different projects. Are there, and you've mentioned Spark, which is what you've been using in these projects. Do you have any other favourite tools of yours in your toolkit that you always pull up, that you maybe always think you're going to use? You may not use them every time, of course, but what are some of the favourite ones that you're using?
I know the whole process starts for me with, there's other people out there that, probably coined different phrases for it, but asking better questions. I know Dr. Todd Conklin, Andrea Baker, others have talked about the value of this. I've been doing it long before it was kind of called something, but starting with those big picture questions, and use those kind of big picture questions to start contextualizing the work. So asking better questions, and asking better questions, I mean, can happen through some of those things that you've already talked about, like learning team and what I mentioned, Spark. It just, if you're an employer, if you're an ergonomist, if you're, a safety professional in the field, and you're like, where do I start? You don't always want to just benchmark the work and the processes against the rules or the reg. And so it affords a starting point that can give a lot richer insights into the work that's really being done. So I would say asking better questions it's not a tool in and of itself, but if you put it, you can kind of map it out into a table. And I know there's increasing requirements from ISO 45001, the regulation here in British Columbia and elsewhere in the globe, really. I was going to say Canada, but it's even broader than that. Where there's a need to do more risk assessments, and using Spark or using these tables where you're learning about successes, problems, assumptions. That is a really nice tool to help uncover some of the risks. It's not necessarily like a quantitative tool like measuring light or sound, but it gives you some of that broader context. Another great tool that I constantly am using, I might scratch it out when I'm talking with an employer, is just like the work system triad. It's not a tool in and of itself, but I know the Canadian Energy Regulator has it on their website. I know Dr. Drew, he's a big voice in the area of fatigue in Australia. He's used the triad before, and it's just a nice illustration that can really illuminate how work happens and how sometimes error and mistakes can happen. So you have in this Venn diagram, you've got people, organizational aspects, and task aspects. And I've been able to show, like with preventing struck buys, manual material handling in healthcare kitchens, how work happens when those three things come together. So therefore, when mistakes and errors and other unwanted things happen, we have to look at the unit of analysis as the system, not just the people lifting practices, or not just like the kitchen blender or, shift work patterns, but like the whole picture. And another tool that is probably a little bit more commonly known, rather than just the triad or Venn diagram, is the shell model. So I think there's other investigation methods that look at PIPO. There's shell. There's a couple of different methods, but it's a nice systematic way. And through 20 years of doing investigations, we've stuck to using shell, looking at software, which is essentially the soft or paperwork aspects of the system, the hardware, which can be tools, equipment, signs, lighting fixtures, anything, hard, the hard part of a system. And then the environmental factors, lighting, dust, noise, vibration, and then the liveware, central L or peripheral L. Central L being maybe in a situation, if you're operating a forklift, it might be the driver of the forklift or the person involved in the work. And then the peripheral L or the peripheral liveware might be supervisor, or in a hospital, maybe it's family members or, the nurses or other people that could be peripheral to the work, delivery drivers, maintenance crews, engineering staff, procurement staff, etc. So I like Shell. Shell is a great visual representation. We've used it in wildland firefighting. We've used it in accident investigations. And again, it's another great visual tool when, especially like in firefighting across the U.S. I know there's been a real focus on looking at firefighter practices. So essentially looking at the liveware, which is good. I mean, that's definitely necessary, but they've looked at, environmental factors. that's also good. I mean, when it comes to fighting fire, you've got thermal aspects and wind, and that sort of thing. But there's also very many other soft aspects like shift rotation, the ICS, instant command structure, and very many other manuals and protocols that need to be followed, and likewise for construction, healthcare, etc. So it really exposes those system level elements that can be really, really valuable to developing effective solutions that are practical and that are effective and sustainable.
So what's next for you?
Great question. As a consultant, it's always a little bit of ebb and flow. But a couple of exciting things are on the horizon. I'm speaking at the Western Energy Institute conference. So looking at how to apply a systems lens in proactive safety. So that is coming up. And I've got a few other clients that see the value in taking this kind of broader systems approach, human factors or safety 2 lens. It's kind of got a few different labels. So looking at some training opportunities and partnering with people to do more training on learning teams, partnering with the Hop Lab in your backyard from Australia, looking at delivering learning teams. And so those are a few things, some talking opportunities and some training opportunities. That kind of sums it up, I think.
Thanks for joining us at the Human Factors and Ergonomics Hub, brought to you by the Human Factors and Ergonomics Society of Australia, where human-centred design really matters. If you like this podcast, make us your favourite in your podcast app. We look forward to chatting with you next time.